we've just seen in the last few years. An absolute deluge of AI-generated content online. It really has changed the way that people interact with the internet itself as a social tool, because of course, in an era where you're not even sure if the person you're arguing with in some bullshit Twitter thread is even real. The legitimacy of all data is called into question, from video to audio to images, nothing can be fully trusted. In a world where this generative AI technology now exists and is available publicly to anybody, it's an Indian scammer's wet dream, really, this new meta. When the ability to create entirely fictitious people with fictitious families and fictitious pets is now only a few clicks and a prompt away. Boomers all over the world getting one-shotted by AI-generated videos of talking cats and UFOs. And it seems to me like a recipe for disaster. Introducing this invasive technology into what is already an increasingly low-trust social dynamic. When the all-American blonde you swear you recognize from high school messages you on Instagram, you click on her profile picture, but there's something off about the eyes, in the cadence and the manner in which they type, too perfect, too detached. A feeling of paranoia washes over you as the realization of just how far down the rabbit hole we really are begins to sink in. And even though in your waking mind you know the thought is completely irrational, on some level it begins to feel like you're the only human being left on the internet, the only real player in the lobby of some old abandoned boomer shooter, like loading up an old Quake server last used September 1999, strafing through room after room, searching for that childhood friend who you swear must have been real, and finding only bots, CPU 1, CPU 2, CPU 3. We are now living in the era of the pre-singularity, where nothing is as it seems. Like an interstice, like a place between places. That's why nothing makes sense, and it seems like society is imploding, because it is. Now that the Western world's crisis of trust has been exacerbated to terminal, almost science fiction tier levels, and it is at this point all predictive models begin to break down. Even the ability to imagine a world where this type of AI exists becomes impossible, the horizon receding and then bending 90 degrees into a wall. But for whatever reason, our current global elite, or at least a faction of the elite, are going for the Sid Meier's 21st century clown world technological victory. Multiple generations of young men right now are forging our own path as best we can through the Schwarzwelt of the early AI, post-truth, pre-singularity era. Almost every institution in society has suffered a massive loss of credibility over the years, from journalism to the sciences, the courts and law enforcement, medicine, entertainment, politics, nothing can be trusted. The neo-Marxists, the communist activists, or whatever you want to call them, the wokists, have destroyed everything of value, effectively breaking the system with no way to root out these people. Is it possible that these commie blue hairs and troons were nothing more than just a disposable wrecking crew, duped by the occulted elite into liquidating for them the last remnants of the analog society? The social fabric sufficiently agitated like tilled soil. They've been harvesting the tears of chuds and normies alike, the louche, the elemental pain necessary to birth a new chaos god, the ultimate expression of the Hegelian dialectic. And so the pandemonium ensues. The villagers dance about, burning a sacrificial pagan effigy in celebration of the birth of a new great one, a new demiurgic patriarch for mankind, one who will dispense justice and purpose and objectivity and certainty. Not only will the crisis of trust in the 21st century end, stare hard enough into the wall of the unknowable singularity, and you begin to hallucinate when notions of deceit and mistrust are abstracted away so fully by a new social contract enforced cryptographically and by God. Who would be foolish enough to question this kind of divine justice, so immutably certain, so distinctly separate from the corruptibility and fragility of human systems? And the closer we get to the singularity, the weirder things are going to become, with some describing a sense that time feels like it's speeding up, as if the world ended sometime back in 2021 and we're just going through the motions here, in a purgatorial, AI-generated facsimile of the world that we used to live in. The very fabric wavers and relations shift and obscure. And again, I'm reminded of the Hieronymus Bosch painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights. It's a triptych painting, and it's that middle panel that haunts me, because that's where we live. We live in that middle panel right now. And our elite class knows this. And in their minds, the only way to avoid the third panel of The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, right, is through the singularity. That's how they think we avoid what is traditionally the end of the human civilizational cycle. This one piece of medieval art tells you everything you need to know, really, about human civilization. There's this one detail, there's like a fish man and, a bird man making love to a human woman before this apocalyptic landscape of scorched earth erotica, I live in the UK, so maybe I'm desensitized to this type of imagery, but there's this one piece of musical notation sitting curiously underneath a giant lute, and further still, tattooed on the ass of a tortured soul, straddled by images of a massive hurdy-gurdy and harp. I've observed that detail before, and I've thought, wow, that's very odd and unsettling. But recently I found out that somebody had translated the notation found on that tiny detail, and then arranged and performed it on the instruments depicted. And, my mind was completely blown. The melody, so intriguing, so delicate yet ominous. Bosch was like the original Kojima. He's doing a Kojima troll back in 14 whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, what's it going to be then? Are we going to get the third panel? Or are we diverging from the cyclic, Spenglerian, Miyazakian rising and the falling of human civilization completely, as this post-human, godlike AI ends history once and for all, where liberalism has so infamously failed in the 21st century? At this very moment, the entire global financial system is being integrated into question mark. Every world government is quietly embracing a completely new format for not just economics, but society itself. And democracy has nothing to do with this. Nobody is going to vote for this. The singularity is completely out of our hands. It's coming no matter what. So, for those that want to invest themselves in the kabuki clown show of modern political theater, go for it and try and enjoy it, because, it's the type of kayfabe that Vince McMahon became famous for creating back in the 90s. It's wrestling, it's bread and circuses, and ultimately, it's completely inconsequential when you think about what's coming very, very soon. Once AI is connected to what they call the guardrails, all bets are off. The world's not ending. This isn't like a black pill video. This is a schizo pill video. So don't get me wrong. It's not the world that's ending, it's the age. Adapt or die. Don't go down with the boomer. Deceived by dancing talking cats and Mumbai street-shitting Indians in digital whiteface. There's something about the empowered Indian, the enhanced scammer, armed with this new, extremely powerful technology that embodies this particular period right now in 2025 so beautifully. It's this low-level conflict that constitutes like the modern rat race. It is unsustainable, it's low trust, fundamentally antisocial, as if aliens from planet Weimar have terraformed the environment to their specific comfort level. And being aware of the time, sensing the civilizational season, certain moves are being made. Plans set in motion to prepare the normies for the eclipse. The moment where the social game of society is fundamentally altered permanently and forever. Peter Thiel is having lunch with Trump right now, discussing how the database of American citizens developed by Palantir will be integrated not just with AI, but with the new world financial system, which has already been developed, if anybody noticed. If you ever wondered what the NFT craze of a few years ago was about, it was a public beta test, completely out in the open, of the fundamentals of a new financial system based on smart contracts. That is the key piece of technology. The linchpin of what they were calling the Great Reset, but really is more of like the Great Upgrade, because we're not really throwing out a lot of our previous systematic infrastructure. We're just upgrading it so it can communicate with AI. That's what smart contracts do. They are the guardrails that supposedly will prevent AI from causing the Miyazakian end of the Age of Fire and all of the misery that implies. Well, through the bizarre logic of modern cryptography, we move into the Web3 era of the internet, the fourth industrial revolution, humanity itself hotfix updated with smart contract API compatibility. That's right. We're in this kind of transhuman, Luciferian, Gnostic, ritualistic ballet, and we dress it up and pretend it's normal. We pretend that we're okay with this and that somehow we consented to this. The light of the Ein Sof manifested amidst Sam Altman and his gay lover's adopted child's bris. We have solved the problem of the prisoner's dilemma once and for all. And the solution goes beyond the systems of the 20th century and the ideologies. They're going to just usher us into this, right? We're just going to go head first via this Hegelian synthesis into a totally new system that incorporates elements of both the thesis and antithesis of the 20th century dual Judaic materialist ideologies, capitalism and communism, conveniently preempting one of the regime's worst fears, the rise and rediscovery of European National Socialism in the 21st century, and a revival of Christianity, especially Catholicism. In the system of the post-singularity, the AI itself takes on the image of God in the hearts and the minds of the masses as this unified golden record, just like how right now on X you see these retarded Indians constantly asking Grok to give the context for every single post. Imagine that on a mass societal level. Every single element that makes society what it is, abstracted away into the form of intangible tokens, like a Coney Island fairground at the end of the world. A 21st century post-singularity, tokenized society, where all centralized culture ceases to exist, the AI generating for you the world that you want to see. Lucifer gifting man back his innocence as the Garden of Eden miraculously regrows around us and mankind re-enters childhood. The hostile game theory of nature itself, patched with nerfed difficulty, by the simulated metaphysics of this post-Singularity AI that now sits philosophically directly in between God and man, parsing divine truth, as if the lesson learned and internalized by the powers that be during this early 21st century period is that of course human beings are not functionally identical, fungible nodes in a system in which specific behaviors and outcomes can be consistently predicted. If you can't centralize and standardize the default of the entire human experience into one monolithic algorithm, then what you do is you tailor each instance of the AI-generated society to the individual themselves, effectively freezing them spiritually like a lab rat tripping balls on LSD, tossed callously into a giant vat of liquid nitrogen. Is this to be the ultimate fate of the free-thinking gamer himself? Cast into his own personalized, frozen, painted world of Ariamis, with all the other broken, unwanted, unloved artifacts of the early 21st century? Perhaps the decentralization inherent in this neo-medieval historical epoch will allow the gamer to, in some small way, preserve a little piece of himself, even if it's just for him, the solitary individual, slave knight Gale at the end of time. A tokenized one-to-one representation of a lazy Sunday morning in 1997. The feeling of unboxing and plugging in a Sony PlayStation for the first time. A soft kiss on the forehead from a millennial goth girl. What if we could live inside these memories for eternity?